Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. How are you doing? I hope you're doing remarkably well. Well, I'm doing incredibly well, but I have got a swollen foot because today I stood on a bee and I was just going around bare feet. I always believe it's a good idea to go around your yard bare feet, and unfortunately I stood on a bee. So I'm sort of limping around on one of my feet for probably the next couple of days, but I'm absolutely fine, and I hope you are too, because I've got a fabulous story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, despair can do strange things to people, and we're all incredibly different in how we may react to it. And unbeknown to me, on this inauspicious, bodeful night, I was about to face a tidal wave of my mother's despair, which would take us both on an unlikely journey that none of us would have ever envisaged. But this would be such an eye-opening experience that both me and my mother would have a paradigm shift so incredibly dramatic that all we thought we knew about the world would be flung to the wayside like a cigarette stub or an apple core cast out of the driver's side window onto the road. Were we supposed to confront this fortuitous, enigmatic, outlandish event? To wake us up out of a sleepy slumber? Possibly. I don't actually know the answer to this question. But this is not an escapade that I would wish on my worst enemy, for it is made out of the incongruous, ambiguous stuff that only your darkest nightmares are created from. A fabric, you would say, that slips through your finger like butter, and is so hauntingly bizarre, it's easy to second-guess yourself and to say, did that really happen? But I assure you, it did. I was driving home from the rural town of Vidalia in Atlanta, Georgia, where me and my best friend Hudson were running a small business together, as there are a lot of ambitious entrepreneurs in this part of the world, starting up little businesses here, which I find encouraging. I was once told, as I'm the numerological number 1, because I was born on the 10th of October, you see, that I'd never ever be happy working for someone else. And this, I think, is intrinsically true. I was to find out a lot of people running small businesses here are, in fact, the birth number 1, which I think is uncanny. Maybe there is something to this inexplicable mystery. The city of Vidalia is located in Toombs County. It's about 155 miles from Vidalia to Atlanta, following the I-16W route. We are known for our Vidalia onions that were first, funny enough, discovered in Texas. They are a short-stay yellow granary onion that thrive here because of the low sulfur content in the sandy soil, along with the perfect climate, which enables the onions to be particularly sweet. My mother called her first daughter Vidalia, which was very apt, given the location of our farmhouse, which is situated in a rural area not very far from the town, where, believe it or not, my mother grows fields of Vidalia onions for the farmer's market. She hires a farmhand to manage the onions, and we've been producing a great crop every year. Both my 2 sisters have long since left home and are married with children, living in downtown Atlanta, quite close to each other. My mother and father got divorced when I was young, but my father regularly visits us and lives only a half an hour away from us. Let's just say he and my mother have remained the very best of friends over the years, so he has always been a fixture and fitting in our lives, always present for Thanksgiving and Christmases. So for us it was like they never really got divorced, but were living separate lives. My father would always tell us that we love each other, but we just can't live together as husband and wife. It would seem that both my mother and my father swore blind they'd never get married again, or ever enter into a serious relationship, and they were true to their word. They were the kind of idiosyncratic people that were better off single, and the truth is, I don't think they could ever love anyone as much as they adored each other. That was the way it actually was, until my mother met Johnny Olsen, and then her attitude to remaining single shifted dramatically, although marriage was something that remained a red flag to her, and was not something she'd ever choose to entertain. My mother was a maverick, bold, liberated, individualistic, unconventional,
She was happy to have an untrampled, casual, carefree relationship. But the trouble was, there was nothing carefree about Johnny Olsen. Even though I was 25 years old at the time, I was still living with my mother, not only for the convenience factor, or the favourable expedients, but because she was all on her own, in that isolated large farmhouse. I wanted to keep a beady, protective eye over her, as I knew being in that sequestered remote home, all on her own, could become terribly lonely. Johnny Olsen was an intense, impassioned character, and I was rather bewildered that my mother was so attracted to the likes of him. He was everything that my mother was not. My mother was emotionally detached, independent, and self-sufficient, but Johnny Olsen was clingy, needy, insecure, jealous, and exceedingly possessive. He was 10 years younger than my mother was, at a mere 50 years old. But my mother was not bothered by the sizable age gap between the two of them, which seemed considerable to me. But then again, what did I know? The first time my mother introduced me to Johnny was actually at a restaurant in Vidalia. I was exceedingly uncomfortable, rather discombobulated about Johnny Olsen from the very beginning. I knew the way he was hanging onto my mother's hand like an insecure 4-year-old did not bode well for her. It was like he was clinging on to her for dear life, like a drowning man grasping onto a rafter out at sea, so incredibly hard that even the rafter looks like it might just break apart, as the pressure placed on it is so immense. We all know, all too well, what happens when you cling to someone hard enough like that. You can drag them down with you, until you both drown. I knew long term that the relationship would start to crack, when my mother became suffocated, or asphyxiated if you like, by this serious but toxic character. At this early honeymoon stage of their relationship, Johnny was throwing out all the stops, serenading my mother's path with a plethora of extravagantly generous gifts, beautiful flowers, streaming compliments, and oodles of charm that oozed out of his mouth like sweet honey. My mother was loving every minute of being needed, adored, loved and wanted. I could see my mother was radiantly happy. She was glowing vibrantly. She looked younger for her years, as if Johnny had given her a spring to her step. My mother's entire wardrobe had been jeans and sweatshirts every day of the week, but now she was wearing beautiful clothes, long white linen pants with bell bottoms, elegant shoes and tops. She looked marvellous, as if someone had taken her aside and given her a huge makeover, as let's not kid, my mother was an attractive woman, and the efforts she was making with her appearance had made this unassuming diamond quite a showstopper. Even my own father was complimenting her on her appearance and giving her approving sideways glances, as if even he was surprised by how fabulous she looked with a lot of preening. "Oh, what do you think of him, sweetheart?" my mother asked, looking at me with dewy eyes like a teenager experiencing the first shades of love. For a moment, I'm lost for words. What I really wanted to say was being restrained and confiscated from me. I didn't want to throw a spanner in the works. How could I, when my mother looked so incredibly happy? I didn't want to ruin her ebullient, unbridled joy. How could I possibly tell her what I really felt? Believe me, I wanted to, with all my heart. But a small part of me was nudging me to be honest, but in the end I settled for the middle ground, as I didn't want to hurt my mother, but at the same time I didn't want to be overly enthusiastic about her relationship. I knew this was going to end with a crash landing, like an aeroplane losing a wing and nose-diving into the Atlantic. I just knew it with every part of my being. "He seems nice enough," I say. "Maybe a little clingy. He looks very serious about you. What will you do if he asks you to marry him?"
"Sweetheart, I'm 60 years old. I don't think people get married when they reach my age. You know how I feel about marriage anyway. That's very unlikely to happen."
"I'm not sure, Mother. He looks pretty intense to me. Rather like a Rottweiler dog guarding his bone, the way he watches over you. I think he's definitely the marrying kind, who isn't going to take no for an answer."
At this my mother hooted with laughter. "What are you like, sweetheart?" she giggled. "You always see things that aren't actually there. You're wrong about Johnny Olsen." Weeks drifted into months. I noticed a change in my mother.
almost like a diamond that had lost its sparkle, as after being worn so much, it loses its lustre, needs to be polished again. My mother had lost her former ebullience. She seemed a lot flatter in her demeanour, but by all accounts, the relationship with Johnny Alston was going strong from what I'd been told by her, but I wasn't entirely fooled by that. I knew something would finally give in that relationship, rather like a large crack in the roof tiles, causing the rainwater to leak through the ceiling, so that it crumbles and disintegrates, so finally it's beyond repair. One evening I'm returning home from my job, in an incredibly good mood, as the business was blossoming, and the stats showed that we'd increased our profits over the last 6 months by 36%, and for a small business, that's phenomenal growth. I had been to the local delicatessens in a celebratory mood that had not gone unnoticed by the people there who knew me. "What's up?" says my friend Jellica, who works in the local bakery and is putting a homemade cheesecake in a box for me. "If you don't mind my saying so, Simon, you look very happy today. I've noticed you can't stop grinning."
"Is it that obvious?"
I say, flushing a pink colour.
"Just things looking rather good on the business front. Things have improved a lot, so I'm celebrating."
"Oh, I'm thrilled for you, Simon. How's your mother doing?"
"She's very well."
"You're telling me. It's amazing what love does to a woman. These days your mother looks like she stepped out of a bandbox. You think things are serious between her and her new lover?"
"I'm not sure, you know. My mother doesn't talk about the relationship much these days. She did in the beginning, but I choose not to interfere. It's not my place. As long as she's happy, then I'm happy."
"You're a good son, Simon. You really are. I hope you both enjoy the cheesecake."
"Don't you worry about that. We most certainly will."
I had decided I was going to make my mother a fabulous meal tonight to celebrate my great news. So I threw pasta, cream, parmesan cheese, white wine, champagne, and salad ingredients into a basket to pay for at the counter, where the very friendly, attentive cashier rang up my purchases with a warm smile on her face. I left the delicatessens whistling happily to myself, with a large brown paper bag in my hands, filled with all the quintessential ingredients to make my mother the best spaghetti carbonara she'd ever tasted in her life. Well, that was my intention anyway. The journey home was no different to every other evening. There was no reason to believe that this weekend would be different to any other. But it was getting dark, and where my mother lives, there are no street lights to be seen anywhere. But there are congregations of tall to medium-sized trees gathered together in sumptuous clusters everywhere you look. Farmers' fields, prepossessing views. Let's just say at this time of night, you can't see a single thing, apart from the dark, sultry silhouettes of the trees, embellishing the night sky with their bushy overcoats of leafy regalia. Soon I'm driving down the long, shingly, knobbly, somewhat bumpy driveway in my white Chevrolet Silverado towards my mother's farmhouse. I observe that everything is so dark tonight, much more than is usually the case. The moon seems ambiguously shrouded by a foggy haze. The twinkling stars, usually so arresting at this time of the year, are subdued, as if overcome by a self-conscious reticence, blurred by a pugnacious thicket of uncongenial mist that carpets the sky in an invasive black mantle. I've never seen the house so disturbingly cloaked in darkness before, without any interior or exterior lights on, and it's an unwelcoming, bodeful sight that leaves me feeling more than a little uneasy. A mere month ago I would have been greeted to the congenial barks of our beloved dogs, but they had died within weeks of each other, at the grand old age of 15. The farmhouse had become incredibly lonesome without their gregarious presence. They had been so protective over my mother, and the greatest watchdogs that you've ever seen. But without them around, the house was foreboding, and it was worse without the lights on. I thought something was terribly wrong. I quickly park my truck on the asphalt driveway and make my way cautiously to the front door, and I'm shocked to see that it's wide open. The hallway is steeped in darkness. Everything feels cold, much colder than usual.
"Mum! Mum!" I call out. "Mum, where are you?"
There is no answer, and panic begins to rise up in my gut. Something is horribly wrong. And then I see her. My mother is sitting on the couch in her pyjamas, staring out into space vacantly, as if she's hundreds of miles away from reality, with her arms around her knees, which are drawn up to her chest. There are 2 empty boxes of ice cream on the side, where some of the melted chocolate has spilled out onto the wooden coffee table. I know if the ice cream has been demolished like that, my mother is incredibly upset. Ice cream is her go-to comfort when all is wrong in her world. My mother looks like a little girl, fragile, insecure, her face as white as snow. I can see in her sorrowful demeanour, she looks as if the entire world has come crashing down upon her shoulders. I immediately dive down onto my knees, throwing my arms around my mother, cradling her.
What's wrong, Mum? Why are you so sad?
Johnny's left me. He's with someone else, she tells me.
Why would he do that? That makes no sense at all. The 2 of you seem to be so in love.
I thought we were, but he wasn't happy with us not getting married. I told him we could live together. He would move into the farmhouse with me, but I told him I didn't want us to get married. He gave me an ultimatum.
He did? What did he say?
He told me if I didn't get married to him, that it was over between us, and he didn't want to proceed with the relationship anymore, because I was wasting his time. He said if I had an inability to commit to him, then it meant I couldn't possibly love him. I thought he was angry with me that he needed to come around to the idea of just living with me, rather than getting married. I gave him the space I thought he needed. And now, I learned from Audrey Markham in town that he's with someone else. He's engaged to that woman who plays the harp in church. I can't believe he's done this to me. How could he be so cruel?
You mean that very quiet, reticent, self-effacing woman that won't say boo to a goose and dresses so dowdy? What's her name? Anna Macy, isn't it?
That's her. They've only been dating for 5 days, and they're engaged now. But I want him back. I want him back, but it's too late. I take my mother's hand in mine and give it a comforting squeeze.
You don't want that man back. Believe me, Mum. If he can dump you like that, replace you with a brand new model in 5 days, then you really should be thankful for small mercies. Maybe you think you want him back, but believe me, you don't. You've had a very lucky escape, if you ask me.
What do you mean?
I mean, he's shallow, insincere, narcissistic, if you ask me, desperate to get hitched. Maybe he's done this to make you jealous, but whatever his motivation, you don't want to get caught up in the snares and tangles of his emotional instability. You've always enjoyed your independence, Mother, and that insufferable possessive man was never a good match for you. He was way too intense, overbearing, incredibly needy.
You never told me you thought that about him. I thought you liked him.
I'm sorry, Mum. I didn't want to hurt your feelings at the time. You seemed so happy, but I could see the writing on the wall with that relationship. You and Dad were much better suited. Dad at least gave you your space. You've always been the kind of person that needs lots of space.
How could he replace me like that? I mean, it's as if I meant nothing to him.
I don't know, Mum. I wish I did, but people are complicated. And if he could dump you so quickly, as I was saying before, I am rather inclined to think he has a narcissistic personality. It seems he's desperate to be married, and that's not a good look. He must be incredibly insecure. He's one of those people that just can't bear to be alone, I shouldn't wonder.
Well, he's been married 6 times, you know.
What? Are you kidding me? He's been married 6 times? You never told me this. Did you ask him why he got divorced from all those women?
He just said they weren't right for him.
But you're so right for him that the moment you put down your foot about marriage, he then replaces you in 5 days. That's rich. What it tells me, Mother, is he's only ever interested in you if you were to become his wife. It's Anna Macy you should feel sorry for. She's the one going to be lumbered with that colossal jellyfish with stingers in his tail that you can't even see.
My mother raises herself up from the sofa, groaning as she gets up. I feel sick, son. I've overdone all that chocolate ice cream. I think I need to take a walk in the woodgrove. The exercise will make me think more clearly.
You are joking. You can't go walking in the woodgrove at this time of night, especially without any dogs around. Those woods can be terribly menacing. I wouldn't be comfortable with you being out there on your own. It would unsettle me greatly. Have you seen how dark it is out there? The moon tonight is not exactly friendly, with all that murky mist obscuring her luminescence. Why don't you go for a walk in the morning?
I won't be walking in the woodgrove. The trees at night actually intimidate me. But I will walk along the road. It's perfectly safe there. There are no cars around. I've done it many times before.
Mum, I'd rather you didn't, especially without the dogs. For a start, let me put the lights on in the house. The house is so sombre. It feels like a morgue in here. I really wish you would agree to get another dog, Mum. This place is so lonesome without one.
How can I replace my dogs like that? It's not right.
Of course it's right. Do you think Salt and Pepper would be happy to see you brooding here in your own Melaconia like this? They would be very upset about that. They got very distressed when you were emotional, don't you remember? They'd want you to go and find yourself another dog, another companion. It would do you so much good, and I would feel much better if I knew you had a dog watching over you. I bought some food in the back of my car. I tell you what, how about I make us some spaghetti carbonara and some salad? We can talk over glasses of champagne. You'll feel a whole lot better. Now you sit there, watch something on the box. I don't want you to do a single thing. I've got this all nipped in the bud for you.
Thanks, son. That's so kind of you, says my mother, flickering through the television stations and settling on a movie that appears to have some promise. I sigh with relief. Thank God my mother got rid of that crazy idea about walking along the road in the dark like that. I had driven down it moments before, and it seemed less than inviting tonight.
Supper won't be long, I assure her. I'll call you when it's ready.
I efficiently bring in the shopping from the car and unload the paper bag on the granite kitchen countertop. I assiduously get to work with pasta. I boil salted water on the hob. I fry up pieces of bacon. I add cream and white wine, folding in egg yolks and Parmesan cheese. The kitchen smells delicious as the savoury aroma filters over the house. I whistle happily to myself, feeling a clandestine sense of satisfaction that dreadful intensive man is out of my mother's life, and although she's sad and reflective, I know she will bounce back with her usual ebullience and face life again with open arms. Soon I have the spaghetti in the frying pan. Looks like a work of art that Gordon Ramsay himself would be proud of. The steam billows up from the pasta, and with a fork I taste it for seasoning. It's delicious. It melts into my mouth like butter. The pasta is perfectly al dente, with all the essential bite to it. My mother should enjoy this, I think proudly to myself. Nothing like a good pasta dish to iron away the seeds of despair.
Supper's ready,
I say, as I enter the living room, only to find that my mother is not there. But she's left the television on, blaring away, and there's a note on the coffee table with a red scribble which reads, "Just gone for a quick walk along the road. Won't be long. I've taken bear spray with me and a torch. I'll be back in 20 minutes. I just need to clear my head. Don't fret about me, son. I'll be fine. Keep the pasta warm for me, won't you? I'm sure I've worked up an appetite by the time I return." I am not happy. My intransigent mother can be willfully obstinate at the very best of times. I should have known she'd do this. She's not the kind of person you can ever persuade to just sit down, relax and put your feet up, if she's got other ideas going on in her head. She's as stubborn as a mule, obdurate, dogmatic. Suffice to say, when her headstrong mind is set on something, wild horses will not tear her away from her intentions. That has been the case all my life. Should I go after her, I wonder, or should I give her the benefit of the doubt and trust she'll be back soon? My mother has always needed her space, and when she's upset, it's always plenty of walking and bowls of ice cream that she tends to gravitate to. I mean, she has taken bear spray with her, hasn't she? So why should I worry? She'll be fine, I tell myself. Marianne. My mother's account. I know my son means well, and bless his cotton socks, but my mind is a whirlwind of emotion tonight, and seeing the happy, loving couple on television, swooning over each other in this romantic love scene, has made me sick to my stomach. It's reminding me of what I've lost. In the beginning, Johnny Olsen had been the quintessential charmer that had melted my heart like butter. It had been so long since anyone had given me so much attention, and we fell hard for each other. Well, at least I thought we did. I remember I met him when he went crashing into the side of my car, when I was pulling out of the parking bay, and he didn't actually see me. We exchanged numbers, and he asked me to coffee, and the charm just oozed out of him, and I fell for him hook, line and sinker. Of course, when I learnt he'd been married so many times before, it was a little bit of a red flag, but I soon got over that. In the cold, brutal light of day, the old me would have run from a man like that as fast as a March hare being chased by a fox. The trouble is, emotions are not driven by common sense. They're navigated by our heart. So sometimes the heart can be whimsically naive, impressionable, easily seduced. That was me. Things changed dramatically, though, for me, when I told Johnny I didn't want to get married to him, after he begged me to fly to Las Vegas with him and tie the knot with him in one of those package ceremonies. When I said no, something in him turned right off, like a tap changing from hot to cold. In the beginning, let's say, he'd been far too clingy. It would actually get on my nerves. Sometimes I would feel as if he was closing in on me. But he loosened his control over me when I said no. I told him I loved him, that he could move in with me into the farmhouse, where we could be happy together. But I didn't do the marriage thing. He was not happy about that at all. I remember he looked at me through his hardened eyes that became so icy cold. He said, "If that's the way you feel, I'll be seeing you." He stormed out of the house like a belligerent bull going after a matador's red flag. He slammed the front door behind him so hard, I thought I'd jump out of my skin. He backed out of the driveway so fast that he nearly went crashing into the oak tree there. I had never seen him so enraged, so incandescent before. Even his pugnacious jowls were jiggling with indignation, and then he was gone. In truth, I thought he'd be back, that he needed some space to come to terms with my feelings about marriage, that he would soon calm down, see the sense in my opinion. Imagine my surprise when, during a trip to town, I learnt from Audrey Markham, a very good friend of mine, that my boyfriend was now hitched and getting married to the demure, reticent woman that played the harp in our church. I was to learn that they'd met fortuitously, in a rather familiar way, when he slammed into the side of her vehicle by accident, when she was backing out of a car parking space. And, of course, he had apologized profusely and insisted on taking her out to coffee, giving her the same charming, very flattering one-liner that he had applied to me, that had melted the cockles of my heart.
"My car's got exceptional taste, I have to say. How terribly fortunate I am to have bumped into an angel. Things are looking up for me indeed. If you ask me, our meeting is serendipitous. I must ask you to join me for coffee."
I began to wonder if this was how he providentially met all his previous wives, accidentally on purpose, by ramming into their cars. I suppose it's cheaper than using a dating service. After that stinging, painful news, I realised I'd been so quickly replaced, dismissed, rejected, which rarely hurt and injured my sense of self. It made me wonder if Johnny had loved me at all. I returned home that day, my head spinning. Part of me irrationally wanted him back, and God only knows why. Maybe I was jealous of Anna Macy, now having her claws solidly entrenched into my boyfriend. The truth was, my son was absolutely right. I was well rid of him. When I returned home, I sat there, wallowing in the darkness, staring vacantly out into space, lost in my own melancholia, the muddy wasteland of my distress, whilst getting through what seemed like gallons of chocolate ice cream, to ease away the numbing pain that I was feeling, the desolate sense of loneliness and isolation, the close companions of hopelessness. Of course, it didn't help that I'd lost my two best furry friends, within 2 weeks of each other, very recently. Let's just say, I hadn't been quick to replace them, like Johnny had been to replace me. But I knew my son was right. A farmhouse without a dog is a very lonely place indeed. Now that my son was home, bustling around busily in the kitchen, making a pasta dish for us, the need to go out for a walk just became overwhelming. I so needed the fresh air, the space, the exercise. It was a dreadful pity I didn't have a dog to accompany me. But what the hell? I knew my protective son would not be happy with me wandering off in the night. But I was only going up the road, for goodness sake, and I wouldn't be gone for very long. I removed my pyjamas and threw on a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt, along with a pair of sneakers and a windbreaker, and I put a headlamp on my head and some bear spray in my pocket. I wisely decide to leave the television on, so my son won't suspect that I'm gone. I clandestinely creep out of the front door and walk down our long, rather bumpy driveway towards the dirt road. I'm flooded with an enormous sense of relief to be out in nature, even at night. I find the natural world helps me escape from all my problems. It makes me realise that in the great grand scheme of things, my problems are so tiny, so minuscule, so insignificant, which is a very comforting feeling indeed. At the end of the day, things will get better for me. I've seen it so many times before, like when a field has been burnt to a cinder, and the grass is as black as coal. But in no time at all, the green shoots of recovery are auspiciously seen, as the black grass regenerates and becomes greener, greener than it ever was before. That's what it'll be like for me. I'll get over Johnny and move on with my life. If the earth can regenerate herself, so can I, and I'll be damned if Johnny steals my joy. I won't let him do that to me, never. He'll never have that satisfaction. The night is tenebrous. The moon is hiding her luminescent face behind some stuporous, indistinct, misty cloud cover, and even the stars are pacified, subjugated by this sweeping carpet of maliciously uncongenial fog that has chastened their sparkle away. The unilluminated road that I'm walking down is precariously rocky, so it's not easy, but I don't care. They've been meaning to asphalt this road for ages, but nothing is ever done about the problem. But then, this being an isolated location, the authorities obviously have bigger fish to fry, and this long stretch of barren road remains at the bottom of their must-do list. Despite the ample light from my torch, the Caligonous night is gloomy, sombre, crepuscular, and without my torchlight, I probably wouldn't be able to see very much. Well, not really. The moonlight is minimal. In truth, it complements how I feel, as so I'm not really intimidated by it. I'm just grateful to be walking down this road, throwing the focus of my thoughts away, rather like potato peelings in a dumpster, and just aiming on enjoying this me-time. It's an airy, inauspicious night. There are no frogs or crickets singing their tuneful chorus. Their sounds always give me a sense of reassurance, but they are alienated from the night, like underage youngsters being booted out from an adult bar. If I wasn't so caught up in the upheaval and tangle of my emotions, I would have paid attention to how quiet and still the night had become. The only thing I can hear is the rustle of leaves, as a gentle caressing wind sweeps across the road, giving me little kissing nudges on my cheek. Then I see it, squatting in the middle of the road. At first it looks small, inconspicuous, obscure, and from the side profile I think there's a dog run over in the middle of the road. So I quickly run towards the poor thing, eager to help it if I can. My mind so gratefully glad to be thinking of something else other than myself. But it is when I'm feet away from the dog that its head swivels round to look directly at me, glaring at me through menacing bright red eyes, the colour of traffic lights. This iniquitous, godless creature that looks like something the devil spat out, a piece of his chewing gum perhaps, stands up on 2 feet, rises up at about 8 feet off the ground. I realise it has the body of a man, the face of a wolf, and this thing, it is not pleased to see me. Not one bit. Indeed, the very fact that I dared to approach him so presumptuously, when I had grievously mistaken him for a dog, has gone down with him like a lead balloon. This creature has a haughty, prideful, stuck-up arrogance that is not acquainted with the nature of a dog. In fact, the air is literally smoking and steaming with the creature's wrathful indignation. The iniquitous look he is giving me says it all that I actually need to know. I want to eat you. I stare at the creature, unable to comprehend what I'm perceiving. No, this is not real. There is no way this is real. It's a trick of the light. It's my imagination. I must be dreaming. But I know I'm not. My legs tremble beneath me. I become unsteady on my feet, like a wobbly camping chair. I try to run backwards, keeping my eyes deliberately fixed on the creature. My movements are clumsy, uncoordinated, restrained by a reluctant fear that has seized me under its powerful grip, held me hostage to the surreal tension of this poignant moment that is so pronounced you can cut it with a knife. I know I should run away as fast as I possibly can, but nothing is working. My body is not reacting like it should. It's like my motor instincts have become paralysed, like a stalling car that simply refuses to start unless you bring out the jumper leads and give the engine one hell of a wallop. If someone were to throw a bucket of ice-cold water over my head, if only, then my instincts might just roll into action, and I would start up like a purring engine. But right now, the moment has ensnared me, like an otter, helpless in a trap, and it's like all common sense and rational reasoning has eluded me, along with my instincts that have wantonly abandoned me. Oh my God! This creature is the most terrifying thing I have ever beheld. Is he a werewolf, I wonder? The creature has a snout covered in blood, as if he's recently eaten and has failed to lick away the evidence. He's drooling as he looks at me, and this is not the drool you would see from your average dog. This creature's drool is elastic. It springs out of his mouth in a foaming goo. The next thing I know is he pulls back his mouth to display his sharp incisor teeth. And this is not normal. He has 2 rows of teeth, human-like hands and feet with insanely sharp claws instead of nails. The creature lets out the most discomposing growl that literally reverberates through my entire body. And that is the jumper lead that I've been needing to get myself started. I turn around and run, while he is roaring behind me. I don't know why I'm bothering to run. I might as well surrender to my fate. I know I'm already dead. There is no way on God's earth that I'm going to get out of this pickle alive. It's not possible. A large hand grabs me. Claws dig violently into my skin. I yelp out in pain as the creature scratches into my flesh through my windbreaker. That's how sharp his talons are. The creature throws me on his back like a sack of oranges. My terrified, strident, high-pitched screams ring through the night like a resounding bell, but no one hears me, as my screams are absorbed like the water in a sponge. The vibrational plagency of my hopeless, desperate cries are lost in the wind, blending seamlessly into its wailing resonance, becoming one with it. I try desperately to fight back, but I just can't. The smell of this hostile, vindictive creature is disgustingly putrid. I've never ever smelt a smell like this, and hope to never again. He smells of death and decay. The creature runs like the wind with me on his back. I don't know where he's going, but his movements are very jolty, very uneven. I'm now praying to God earnestly that it'll be over for me quickly. I don't want to feel any pain. The next thing I know is the creature is running towards the abandoned house that is parked away from the ditch on the side of the road. An old woman lived there once, about 4 years ago, but she's disappeared. No one knew what actually happened to her, and the authorities weren't able to trace her family members. Why is he bringing me here? The house is falling apart. The rambling creepers are hungrily devouring the house. Their tenacious tentacles have plundered the roof and are growing down the inside walls. The creature charges through an open door, his ponderous feet crashing across warped floorboards. Even though I cannot see a thing, I can smell damp, mildew, decay and dust. The creature throws me in the toilet cubicle. He locks the outside door. I'm now trapped in the bathroom. How did the creature know about locking doors? I am stunned by how intelligent this wolf-like humanoid really is. This is a worse fate than I could have ever envisaged for myself. I imagine the creature's not hungry now. That's why there was blood all over his mouth. He's probably already eaten, so he's locked me away for the time being. Now I have to sit here, like a percolating cup of coffee, waiting, stewing, marinating, and festering in my trepidation, until he decides it's dinner time. I put down the toilet seat and sit down. I'm sure the loo is disgusting. I'm thankful it's too dark to see anything. You'd think I'd be crying, but I sit there stoically on the loo seat, waiting for my fate. I know the creature has gone, as the ghastly stench of death and decay has finally left. How I wish I'd brought my cell phone with me, but I'd left it charging on the side next to my son's cell phone. And to my horror, I discover that my bear spray is no longer in my windbreaker. It must have fallen out. I'd forgotten all about it in my angst. I could have used it on the creature when he came back for me. What a bummer. I don't understand how this could have happened. Back to Simon. I'm now frantic. I know something is terribly, terribly wrong. I can taste it, feel it, and sense it in every fibre of my being. My mother wasn't back, and an hour had gone by. Let's just say she was nowhere to be seen. I was more than a little concerned. Even if she was walking along that road, anything could happen to her walking around in the pitch-black night like this. And that road is tumultuously rocky. It would be very easy to trip. I quickly grab my keys, climb into my car, and drive down the road very slowly to see if I can see any sign of my mother. But I am greeted to the dark, foreboding night, and to a profound sense that something is really off. As I drive down the road, there is no sight and sound of my mother anywhere. All of a sudden, my car swerves, and I end up with my wheels caught up in a ditch on the side of the road. I swiftly climb out of my car to see how bad the ditch actually is, and how best to manoeuvre it out of the muddy trap. I prudently shine my torch over everything, when I catch sight of some bear spray lying in the ditch close to a monstrous footprint that rarely looks like a wolf imprint. But this track is massively large. I'm now fearing the worst. Has my mother been seized by a predator of some kind? I happen to glance up and see the silhouette of the abandoned house, and given that I found the bear spray close to the house, I decide just to check it out. I'm glad I did, as when I call out my mother's name, I hear her banging and shouting out, "I'm in here! I'm locked up in the toilet cubicle!" I quickly run into the house, opening up the door of the toilet, and my mother flings herself into my arms. "How did you know I was here? How did you know I was here?"
"I didn't," I say. "I found your bear spray in the ditch, and since it was close to the abandoned house, I thought I ought to check it out. Let's get out of here now."
"Let's get out of here now, I agree," says my mother, looking at me through eyes rounded with terror. "It could come back! It could come back! It was going to kill me!" I had seen the wolf imprint, so I don't ask any questions, but quickly escort my distraught mother back to my truck. She's shaking like a leaf and trying to talk, but words are failing her. They're not coming easily. But she kept saying, "Wolf! Wolf!" Lo and behold, with my mother in the truck, I manage to manoeuvre my truck out of the ditch, and then I see it, in the middle of the road, screaming at the both of us. A humanoid wolf-like creature, thin at the waist and huge at the shoulders, covered in pitch-black hair, running towards us, screaming like a banshee, and launching itself at the car like a charging rhino. I've never seen anything so hideously grotesque in all my life. The creature begins to run with my car, side by side, glaring at me through the window. I pull open the window and spray out the bear spray into its eyes, and it screams loudly at the top of its lungs and runs into the night. Let's just say it took us weeks to get over this dreadful incident, but my mother reckons coming so close to death meant getting over Johnny Olsen was actually an easy ordeal. I did go back to the abandoned house in the day, armed to the nines with a rifle. I did see signs of a nest on one of the floors, and a few wolf-like tracks on the wooden panels, but there were no signs of the creature anywhere. All these years later, I wonder what the hell it was, but my views of the world have changed dramatically. Nothing is as it seems. So there you are. That's my story.
Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.